register, trying to ensure that we can provide support in terms of cash assistance, temporary shelter, and psychosocial support to children who are arriving here. But the situation is very concerning for all of us in Tawila about the people who we still cannot account for.
Thank you, Shashwat. I would now like to invite Mathilde Vu, who is NRC Sudan's advocacy manager. She herself has also been engaged on the Sudan conflict for the past 4 years. Mathilde, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, yes.
So we've heard from Shashwat on the situation and what he has been seeing and witnessing personally. We've all seen it. Al-Fashir has dominated the headlines over the past 2 weeks almost since its fall. But this crisis didn't start just days ago. Can you walk us through how we got here and what has been happening over the past year?
No, absolutely. I mean, what's important to understand right now is that this campaign of destruction that we're seeing over this past week has been calculated. It's been planned. It's been 18 months now that al-Fashir, the largest city of Darfur, is being besieged. And when I say besieged, I actually mean physically besieged with the berm surrounding the city, with starvation being used as a weapon of war, with every single request to send humanitarian assistance into the city of al-Fashir being rejected, with traders not being able to cross into al-Fashir and replenish markets. What this means is that the people of al-Fashir have been surviving on animal food for the past months. They've been drinking rainwater for the past month. They've been shelled. They've been obliged to dig holes on the ground in order to survive. We've been, for example, supporting local responders for the past year now in al-Fashir. Local responders who are risking their lives every day to provide food. Towards the end of September, they were obliged to dig the entire kitchen underground in order to protect the kitchen and then distribute the food house to house so that there wouldn't be a crowd inside al-Fashir, so that the crowd wouldn't be shelled. So this is not an isolated area at all. People have been also attacked while they were trying to flee. This has happened over this past week, but this has also happened over this past 3 months, systematically in Tawila, when we have received people who barely made it to al-Fashir. They told us horror story, and really, like, staying or leaving al-Fashir has been a deadly gamble. So, as Shashwat said, where are the people fleeing? 85,000 people are estimated to have fled al-Fashir according to the United Nations. Only 6,000 right now, a little bit more, have reached Tawila, and that is, again, what is really keeping us awake at night right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those insights, Mathilde. And I can see that we are receiving some questions in the Q&As. Thank you for everyone posting their questions, asking from Fatma from AP and Reuters. They're asking some questions about the journeys that people are going through. So we will, I think some of those questions have been addressed, and we will address more, but also we still also have the ending or the last part of the session where we can also go through those questions in specific. Shashwat, I want to turn back to you now, and you've been in Tawila these past days, and you've met people arriving from al-Fashir. Is there a moment or encounter that, from what you've seen, that has really stayed with you?
So I'll talk about two experiences that I've had that really worry me, but at the same time also give me some hope. So these are stories of despair on the one hand and hope on the other hand. The first one is about coming across 6 children who were unaccompanied, who didn't know where their parents were, where their grandparents were, where their siblings were. They just arrived with people in a group, but had no relative. But then the hope there was that a woman who herself has been displaced from Fasher and has had to make this arduous journey from Fasher to Tawila, stepped up and say, "No, I will take care of these 6 children." So, so you see that despair and that hope. In a similar vein, I met a father who basically was crying and saying that my 5-year-old son is dead because of the conflict. We lost him. It's been few days, and we are sure that he wouldn't survive on his own. I met the same father a few days later, and he said, I found my son. He was in the neighboring camp within the large settlement that is in Tawila, and somebody had just picked the child on the way coming here and brought them, and somehow they managed to meet. So for me, again, it's the desperation where you have fathers, where you have children, where they don't know where their family members are. And I think for me, these are the testimonies when you encounter, when you talk to them, when you see tears on the one hand and joy on the other hand of being reunited. I think this is something that never leaves you.
Thank you. That was quite powerful to hear. Thank you for sharing that, Shashwat. I would like also to build on what you've said. What are people telling you about family separations, missing men, detained boys, or those who are still trapped on the road between al-Fashir and Tawila? What are you hearing about these stories?
We are repeatedly hearing about how there are thousands of people who are in different locations and are not able to move for various reasons. One, the fear of being killed on the way, the fear of being kidnapped and being held hostage on the way. Two, not having resources to be able to buy their way from where they are into Tawila. So a lot of people who've arrived here have had to leave their families back in different locations because women and children are not in a position to move and to travel on foot all these distance because of what Mathilde mentioned, the siege for the last 18 months and the situation that they are in today. And third is that many of them are saying and in telling us that they have had to hide for days in desert, crawl on their elbows so that they are not spotted, they are not targeted, and they are not kidnapped. So we're hearing different stories about how people are trapped, are stuck, are trying to find escape routes, don't have resources to come to safer locations, are afraid to move to safer locations, and 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 are desperate. Every single person who has arrived from Tawila has one or multiple members of their family that they cannot account for.
Thank you, Shashwat. Mathilde, coming back to you. Given how dangerous and fragmented the situation is, are aid organizations such as the NRC still able to operate inside Sudan? What are the main barriers to delivering aid, to access the population? Are you able to work in Sudan generally? I mean, we can split those into two questions, but I would like to know how is the NRC still able to work inside Sudan, and what are the main barriers for delivering aid?
Thanks, yes. We are working in Sudan. Shashwat, right now, I'm a country director, and we have a team of like 300 amazing colleagues working in Sudan. Local responders are working in Sudan. But I will say this one thing, is that working in Sudan as a humanitarian organization is extremely difficult. One, because of the way the warring parties are waging this war, the fact that the warring parties have been systematically violating the basic concept of international humanitarian law and obstructing humanitarian access in some cities, such as al-Fashir, but also places in the Kordofan that have been, cut off aid now for the past year and plus. So that's one. Second, it's difficult to work at the pace that is needed. There is an array of bureaucratic impediments in Sudan that makes it very difficult for an organization like us to save lives on time. Third, and that's super important, and I think it's a question that has been raised in the Q&A, the funding is not there. We're talking about the world's largest humanitarian crisis. The international organization in Sudan says that they need $4 billion to answer the crisis. We have 70% gaps. What this means is that organizations like mine in Tawila, for example, have to take heartbreaking choices. Do we help the people who just arrived, or do we help the people who arrived last month? The same people who are suffering from the exact same sickness, the exact same abject living condition, who survived the same exact atrocities. Yet we just have to find the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. And that is really the answer to your question. No, the donor community, the world has not really met the moment when it comes to Sudan. There hasn't been enough international solidarity when it comes to Sudan, and when it comes to also the hosting countries for the refugees, some of the poorest countries in the world, like Chad and South Sudan.
Thank you, Mathilde, for that. I'm going to turn back to Shashwat for a final question for him. And Shashwat, you're speaking to us from Tawila, which is one small town receiving thousands of displaced families. But the rest of the country is also at war. And Sudan is often described as the world's largest humanitarian crisis today, just like I mentioned at the beginning of this briefing. Could you help us understand the broader picture beyond Tawila? What is happening across Sudan right now?
We can talk about statistics and data and how the humanitarian context in Sudan is so severe and the scale is so huge. But going beyond data and statistics, I just want to highlight that we've always talked about the siege of Fasher. We have cities like Kadugli and Dilinj that are under siege in South Kordofan. We have ongoing conflict and massive displacements happening in North Kordofan, in South Kordofan, in West Kordofans. We have 10 million, we still have 10 million internally displaced people in Sudan and more than 3 million people who have had to seek refuge in the neighboring countries of Chad, Egypt, South Sudan, Ethiopia. If we talk about children, as of now, we have 13 million children who are out of school. And I would want to emphasize the fact that we're talking about a generation being lost, a generation out of school, a generation which is living in camps under tarpaulins, and a generation which is supposed to build nations. And we are watching and seeing it actually just disappear in many ways. The staff in Kadugli, which is a town under siege, finds it very difficult to meet their ends meet, to meet their daily requirement for food, because there isn't food available in the city. Nothing can come in, nothing can go out. So we are talking about situations across Sudan which are very, very difficult to comprehend. The Hunger Watchdog, which recently again released, as to how there are still locations which are famine, under famine. There are millions of people across Sudan which are still in IPC4 and IPC5, which is basically in extreme levels of food insecurity and cannot meet their daily dietary requirements. Leave aside the nutritional requirement that is required. We're not talking about food diversity. We are just talking about basic calorie intake. That's also not available for millions of people. So yes, it's a picture. It's a very grim picture that I'm painting of the context in Sudan. But I just want to reiterate the fact that it's the people of Sudan who are losing. I don't know what else I can say, but every single individual in Sudan currently has lost something or the other, whether it's their house, whether it's a family member, something or the other over the last 2.5 years since this conflict started.
Thank you so much, Shashwat, for that. I'm going to ask Mathilde this next question. It will be the last one from those for this session before we move to the Q&A session. Mathilde, the question is about what needs to be done now. We're hearing from both you and Shashwat how urgent the situation is. And for that, what do you believe needs to happen from donors, from mooring parties, from regional actors, from those with influence? What needs to happen to protect civilians and to allow aid in?
What needs to happen is for the international community to wake up. I mean, I was in Darfur a few months back, and when I was talking to people, they told me that they felt abandoned. And I think they're right, and we think they're right. Since the past 2.5 years, Sudan has been systematically neglected. It's been number 20 of the priorities of most of the world's leaders. There hasn't been enough political attention. There hasn't been enough high political attention, continued one, to make sure that few things, there's rules in war. And the rule number one, regardless of the ceasefire, regardless of the pause, is to protect the civilians, is to protect civilian infrastructure, to protect aid workers, local responders. There's a second rule, is to make sure that assistance reaches the people in need. That's the rule of war, not the rule of peace. This has not happened. So the international community needs to change the way they think about Sudan. They need to pressure the backers as well to ensure that these basic rules of war are respected so that we can at least save lives instead of delaying death, which is what we've been doing now for the past 2.5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And thank you to both of our panelists for those powerful insights painting how devastating the situation is. We're not done. We will now transition to the Q&A session to answer the questions that came directly from you. There's still time, so please submit any questions you have in the Q&A session, in the Q&A function at the top of your screen, so we can get to it if time allows. I will start with the first question that came to us from Avery from CNN, and she asked about the attacks that are happening on medical infrastructure and medical staff, trying to get a sense of the health needs on the ground. I think this question, who could answer that?
I can take it, Elias. We've heard from people who've arrived in Tawila as to how there is systematic attack on health infrastructure that's happening. We've also heard from organizations which specialize in health support and providing health services, that the situation of people who are coming into Tawila is very bad, and they know and they've heard that they were very limited to no health services that were available for them in Fasher. Um, and I think it's evidence in some ways of the fact that there has been a denial in some ways of health services being extended to the population in Fasher, uh, just given and looking at the conditions of people who are arriving in Tawila from Fasher.
Thank you, Shashwat. Appreciate it. The next question came to us. I'm sorry, I'm not sure of the name, so pardon me. I'm not going to mention it, so it's not I don't pronounce it incorrectly. But the question goes like this: how safe is Tawila for the displaced persons? Who can take this question?
I think I can go. At the moment, and since the past 2 years and a half, since the past at least 2 years, Tawila has been the place of refuge for the people fleeing al-Fashir, as well as for the people fleeing Zamzam camp, which was this very big camp just outside of al-Fashir that was attacked in April, and that was hosting 500,000 people. Now, no one is really safe in Sudan, this one. We've seen the front lines moving. We've seen no signs from the warring parties to, put down the weapons. That's one. We haven't seen also a signal that any lives is being respected. That's two. And then third, they find safe, because right now in Tawila, there's a cholera outbreak. I mean, over this past 3 months, a lot of people, actually a few hundred people, died of cholera. Other people die because of a simple disease that they couldn't cure. You have children who've been so malnourished, so famished during this past few months in al-Fashir. Even with the treatment, maybe they won't survive. The fact that Tawila is so overcrowded, the fact that the humanitarian response is so overwhelmed, makes it very difficult right now to save lives. And so you may have been able to survive a atrocity. You may not be able to survive malaria. And I think that's the reality of anyone right now who's fleeing in Sudan at the moment.
Thanks, Mathilde, for that. The next question, Andaki, we're seeing questions coming in, so we thank you all for your questions, and we are taking note of all of them. The next question goes like this. It says, during the war, there have been reports about child soldiers. What do you know about that? And what have people from al-Fashir said about it specifically? This is coming from Sarah from the Swedish Broadcasting.
And go on again. So from the people that we received in Tawila at the moment, they haven't told us about child soldier. We also haven't asked the question, so that's important to note. That being said, I think the issue of forced recruitment of civilians into armed groups is widespread and quite documented by human rights and child protection organizations across Sudan. We even have seen examples of boys in secondary school in Darfur having to basically flee Darfur to Chad because they were afraid of being forced to join an armed group. Really, the children are the first victim of this war because of what Shashwat described earlier: the malnutrition, losing the parents, the trauma that they have seen. I'll give you an example right now. In Tawila, we just started our education program with the ones who just arrived these past few days. And basically, it's not lessons. We're just trying to make them laugh. We're just trying to make them breathe and play. It's psychosocial support. It took the teachers 3 days to have the kids engage in any of the activities, because they were so traumatized. So again, it's not because we haven't seen it or we haven't heard it that it's not happening, but we'll let like specialized organization, develop this further.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that, Mathilde. The next question, let me just pull it. Pardon me for the delay. Okay. The next question says, it's coming from Emmanuel from Radio France International. What are the most urgent resource gaps right now in terms of medical supplies, shelter, and food?
I think what we are seeing right now is the first and foremost requirement is basic shelter. Basic shelter. Hygiene items like soap is also not available. And Method just mentioned about cholera. We've already seen 2 cases of cholera amongst the new arrivals that have just come in over the last 1 week. And we know how fast cholera can spread. So basic thing as soap is not available right now. We don't have basic hygiene items. We don't have water availability. Overall, I mentioned that there are over 600,000 internally displaced people in an open air camp in Tawila. The water availability is already very limited for the population that is here right now and has to be rationed. And now with the new influx, it will be very difficult to ensure that there is safe water available. Nutrition supplies, food, it's every single thing. There is nothing that is not required as of today. We have seen that the humanitarian organizations have pulled in all their efforts to try and ensure that health system is somewhat functioning. We are able to address basic needs. We are even able to try and address secondary needs. As Norwegian Refugee Council, we've been trying to provide temporary shelter, but they are far too few for the numbers that are here. We are actually providing cash assistance so people can choose what they can do. But again, the resources are so limited to cover the households and the number of people that are here. So I would say that there is a need for us to focus and prioritize, but there is a need to ensure that there is water, there is hygiene support, there is support for shelter, and there is support for food and cash, so that people can survive after going through all the trauma and all the days of traveling from Fasher all the way to Tawila.
Thank you so much, Shashwat, for that answer. I'm going to move to the next question, and that's one we received from Ben from the Telegraph. And he's asking, are you hearing evidence of sexual violence during the fall of al-Fashir? And is there evidence that it was an organized, systematic tactic? You say you have testimony from people arriving in Tawila. Do you have any you could share that mentions sexual violence, please?
So we've heard from organizations which actually are looking at gender-based violence, sexual violence, and we do know that there are multiple cases and organizations trying to support the survivors of gender-based violence and sexual violence. It's very difficult to say if it has been used systematically, but yes, we can very safely say that there are numerous cases reported to organizations which are managing and which are supporting the survivors, that they have gone through and they have been subjected to sexual violence during their move from Fasher to Tawila.
Thank you for that, Shashwat. The next question comes in from Alexandra, who is asking, sorry, Alexandra from Göteborg. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. The question is, do you have any estimations of how many people may still be in al-Fashir? And are there any other locations than Tawila that people move to that you know of? There's another follow-up, which is there also have been reports on very high death tolls in al-Fashir. What are your thoughts on this matter? Happy to repeat the question to any of you, Matilda or Shashwat.
No, it's okay. And I'll also take it for Mariam risk as well. Let me say it this way. It's a complete black box right now, al-Fashir. Even prior to the takeover in the fall of al-Fashir last week, we had immense difficulties with having any information from the ground. Why? Because since the past 2 years and a half, there's been zero telecommunication in Darfur, including in al-Fashir. There's no network. It's just not working. People are relying on basically Starlink in order to send a message. Since the fall of al-Fashir, everything went in a blackout. The story that we hear, what we're telling you right now, is only coming from the people who dripped into Tawila. So the only thing that I can tell you is that the only information that we have from al-Fashir on a regular basis is what we get from the air, from the satellite imageries. And other organizations have repeatedly documented blood that can be seen from satellites, civilian infrastructure that have been destroyed. So it's extremely difficult for us to tell you how many people are trapped, simply because right now there is no way to get any information from this black box. That is the same for any areas outside of Tawila and outside of al-Fashir in this no man's land. And I'm going to address also the question of what does it look like? It's a desert. There's no roads. There's no roads. There's barely any village, and there's barely any wells on the way. People who arrived in Tawila arrived so dehydrated that some of them cannot talk and have to be straight away referred to the hospital. There's literally the only thing that people can do in order to flee al-Fashir is counting on their own feet, sometimes on a donkey, and if they're very, very lucky, a truck will pass by and pick them up, but perhaps against extortion. So it's very difficult to know where they are. It's very difficult to know how many are basically trapped. All we know is that only 6,000 people have reached Tawila, where we are, and perhaps a few thousand have reached North Sudan right now. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Matilda. And I can see that you in your answer we've combined a number of questions. So I hope we've answered as many as we could. We're still getting some questions, but I'm afraid this is the time we have for today. But for those who we couldn't answer during the session, we will respond by email. We are keeping a note of all those questions. And I do want to thank our speakers and our audience for taking the time to attend today's event, the briefing, and for your participation. We've heard clearly from Shashwat and from Matilda on how the fall of the Fasher is part of a much longer and wider crisis. As we've heard, people are reaching Tawila exhausted, injured, often separated from families. Many boys and men are still missing or trapped. Health centers have been attacked. Aid access is extremely limited, or blocked even, and the needs for food, medicine, and shelter far exceed what's available. And we also heard how beyond Tawila, the rest of Sudan remains at war, and this is a nationwide humanitarian catastrophe. We hope you found the conversation today valuable. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me with any further questions you might have. My email address, you can see it on the screen. And we do thank you so much for your support